From the Toronto Star, I'm Sabah Itazaz, and this matters. They're Canadian residents who never got to reside in Canada. Thousands around the world had high hopes for a new life in Canada after getting their permanent visas. They sold their homes, quit their jobs, and got ready to go to a new home that had invited them. And then COVID-19 slammed the door in their face. Since mid-March, Ottawa has imposed strict travel restrictions against foreign nationals, including holders of permanent resident visas. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking for so many whose permanent visas are expiring or have already expired. They need to make a landing in Canada before that happens, but they can't because of COVID-19. The Star's immigration reporter Nicholas Keung will be on a bit later to discuss the implications of the immigration backlog and explain what's going on. But first, I talked to Fatima Camara, who is stuck in Belarus with her family after they all got their PR visas. They're in limbo. They have packed up their old lives, they cannot start their new life, and they don't know what comes next. Hi, Fatima. How are you doing?
Hello, Saba. I'm okay, thank you.
I know it's a challenging situation for you right now. You and your family got a permanent residency visa for Canada, right? And then COVID happened, and you're stuck in a terribly frustrating situation, right? What happened?
We received our visas and confirmations of permanent residence. We received it on March 26, but our case has been approved on March 10th. On March 18, the embassy and the Canadian borders and everything were closed due to pandemic. And we stayed in Belarus. We tried to travel to Canada because the information of immigration site told us that new permanent residents, which cases were approved before March 18, can travel to Canada. But in reality, we couldn't do it.
What happened? Why not?
I don't know why we bought our tickets, not just booked, but bought our tickets. We sold our house, our businesses, me and my husband. We packed our luggage. We sold our cars. We said goodbye to all our big family, to our relatives and friends. We tried to board the plane, but they took us out from the plane because Canada border officer that our airline staff called, they told that we can't travel.
So basically, you had wrapped up your life in Belarus and you were all ready for your new life in Canada. So where does that leave you now? Are the kids out of school? Have you left your jobs? What's going on?
You know, we tried to travel to Canada in June. It was vacation time, so we stayed in our friend's apartment. Our children were with their grandmothers. We couldn't find the job with me and my husband because we sold our businesses. We have changed all our money on Canadian dollars. We have bought almost all Canadian dollars in our town, in our city. So for now, we have lots of Canadian dollars, which we couldn't spell. Children, they went to school in September, back to school, but every month we are waiting for something new. We are waiting when the travel restrictions will be not extended, but when they leave us to go to Canada. But we have no exception.
Right, and the clock is ticking down because obviously there's an expiration date to the permanent residency visa that you get, right?
Yes, our visas and corpus expiring date is December 16. But it's a problem in our country that we have no Canadian embassy here. The nearest Canadian embassy is in Moscow, Russian Federation, or Warsaw in Poland. But due to COVID, all borders are closed. We can't go there even to make new visas. So I don't know what we have to do for now.
So are you worried about that? Because obviously at this point, nothing is clear and your visas are expiring. Have the immigration authorities or anybody told you what to do in case that happens?
Sure, I'm worried about it because every single week I write letters, I fill web forms on immigration sites asking for an authorization for travel because I found the work in New Brunswick. It's the provincial who nominated my family. I found the job. I can start working in the month of January. I have friends there who could help us to quarantine for 40 days.
So, obviously, it's not easy to start a new life in a new country. Just the amount of logistics involved in, like you're talking about, uprooting and then settling roots somewhere else, and now being stuck in the middle, this must have had a big impact on you financially as well, right?
Of course, it had a big impact on our financials because we lost our jobs, because we sold our apartment, and now we live in our friend's apartment. It's one bedroom apartment for 7 persons. It's really hard to live here. We have no vehicles. We had 2 cars before, and now we have no cars. We have to pay taxis for our children to reach their schools. It's really hard to live without a ground under our legs, you know. We lost the half of our life. We would like to start new life in Canada, and now we are behind two lives, you know. We can't live here and we just can't live there. It's not a real life, it's like a fiction.
And do you have any idea what comes next? Are you still hopeful about a new life and future in Canada?
I really hope that we could travel to Canada one day. We really hope to do it. I don't know when. I hope it could be as soon as possible, maybe next month, maybe in the end of winter or in spring. But it's really a hard time for our family, for our kids. They dreamed about Canada. They learn English now and French too. They really want to start new life in Canada. And for now, we stay in our country, and our country now is not in a good political and social and economical situation. And we have to spend our money here, but we want to spend it in Canada.
Right. This is obviously a very scary situation to be in. Thank you so much, Fatima, for talking to me. I wish you good luck, and I hope you and your family can start your new life in Canada soon as residents.
Thank you very much, Saba. It was nice to speak with you.
That was Belarusian Fatima Camara, who is a teacher and a massage therapist. We'll be right back. Meanwhile, the federal government is working to restart the immigration system that faltered badly during the pandemic, but the process has been slow and frustrating, and Canada is falling far short of its immigration goals. I'm joined now by the Star's immigration reporter Nicholas Keung to talk about what the implications are for Canada and for these new would-be Canadians who haven't even seen their new home yet. Hi, Nicholas. How are you doing?
Hi, Seba. Very good.
So it's been such a chaotic, unprecedented time for all of us through COVID-19, and with borders closed, then partially reopened with travel restrictions, etc. Talk to me a bit about how this pandemic has impacted Canada's immigration system.
The impacts of the pandemic has been huge. Since March, the pandemic has halted the entire immigration system, and not just in Canada, but worldwide. We're talking about those people who want to come here temporarily, such as tourists, international students, and foreign workers, as well as permanent residents or would-be permanent residents who come as skilled immigrants, spouses and family members to Canadians. Then there are also the refugees who are sponsored for resettlement in Canada or who just want to come to the border for asylum processing of all these applications had stopped for months, with immigration staff working from home with reduced capacity. And part of the processing system is still very dated. A lot of different programs still required what they call paper applications, meaning that they have to submit the physical documents, papers. So the transition, to virtual processing was definitely a challenge for immigration officials. Another issue has to do with the border closures. We are just recently, really the system slowly being reopened, and there's a huge backup in applications and in backlogs. And that's just on the administrative side, right? On the intake front, we have imposed a lot of, again, the border restrictions to limit traffic out of public health concerns. So even people who already have temporary or permanent visas in their hands, they cannot get in. As a result, government is not really meeting its 2020 immigration targets by a wide margin. By all estimates, by the end of this year, will likely have ushered in just about 200,000 new permanent residents this year, short of the 340,000 we had planned for before COVID-19 hit. For example, if you look at different categories, some of the most important programs, international students, the number of permits issued down by 54% as of August, and for temporary foreign workers is down almost 60%.
And you were talking about permanent residents, those with permanent resident visas. It's also in your piece. Like you're talking about, there are thousands of newcomers who actually have those visas and didn't get to come here at all. They're stuck outside of their would-be new home, sort of in limbo. Tell me more about them.
As we know, in terms of the process, when someone applied and being accepted as permanent residents, they're issued a permanent residence visas. With that visa, they are allowed to cross the border into Canada. What we call that process, we call it the landing process. And at that point, they would be issued a permanent residence card, which would, the real document that recognizes them as a Canadian permanent resident. But before that point, they are still considered foreign nationals. And a lot of people, because, it's not an easy process to uproot yourself from your home country where you grew up and you spent years establishing yourself. So a lot of the migrants in general, once they get that visa, the permanent residence visa, they would get ready. They only have a 6-month window to move. So, it takes time for them to settle, whatever assets they have in their possession, like a lot of them selling their homes, their houses. Obviously, a lot of them had to quit their jobs in order to do all these things, What we're hearing is because of the border closures, a lot of these people already have that visa in their hands, are ready to come. They're not able to. So a lot of them, they already quit their jobs. They moved in with their parents, in a tiny apartment with no financial support while they were, getting ready to move here. And we say, no, sorry, because of the pandemic, we cannot let it into the country. So these people are essentially stranded. They cannot move their lives forward. They put their lives on hold. They put their immigration dreams on hold.
And you were talking about the 6 months window to move and land here. And now all of that is in suspension because of COVID-19. So where does that land them? Isn't there fear that their visas could expire in this time period that they're not able to come?
Right now, the policy is, if they were issued permanent residence visa before March 18th, the day when we started lockdown here in Canada, then they could be exempted to cross the border into Canada, being admitted into Canada. But anyone who got their visas after that date, unless their travel is considered essential, they will be allowed in. But even for those whose visas already expired, they need to apply for what they call an authorization letter to reactivate their visas in order to come here. But it's not a guarantee as well, because very much, the Canada Border Services Agency officers at the airports, at the land border entry, they still have the discretionary power to determine whether someone's travel is essential or not. So as far as we know, there have been right now at least more than 15,000 permanent residence visa holders. Their visas actually have expired. And last we heard about 3,000 by the end of October, about 3,000 applied for the authorization letter, only 270 approvals. Again, the pace is really slow for a lot of these would-be immigrants to realize their dreams to come here.
As you were talking about, when you get your PR visa, you start preparing for your new life. And obviously, there's tremendous financial, psychological, and emotional cost attached to that, right? No one expected this to happen. What are some of the biggest challenges that these newcomers or who would be newcomers are facing right now?
Definitely financially is a huge burden for them because a lot of them is actually part of the government's requirements for any skilled immigrants. When they come to Canada, they need to be able to be self-sufficient financially for the first at least 6 months to a year. There's a huge expense involved in the move. Once they get here, as we all know, like first and last month of rent, it all costs money, right? So I think, usually, everyone, for each person, they would have to, in their bank account, $10,000 for that initial settlement at their expense. A lot of them, because they have already quit their jobs, they cannot go back to their jobs. Some of those jobs already disappeared because of the pandemic. And also, partially their position already been filled by someone else, more junior than them, taken over by someone else. Given the economic climate, financial challenge is a big one. But I think that the more troublesome challenge is the mental stress that they are putting under on top of, living for us, in Canada. Living through the pandemic is already very difficult, very stressful at times. And for these particular group of people, there's the added stress from the uncertainty, not seeing light at the end of the tunnel. I think has taken a huge toll on their mental health. Yeah, I think those would be the two main ones, just not knowing, what is to happen. A lot of them still waiting, they keep contacting immigration departments, immigration officials, but either they would just get a standard form response in an email or they don't hear anything at all. And I think, that not knowing is really killing a lot of them.
Right. Uncertainty can be torturous in these kinds of circumstances. So, Nicholas, Canada had a goal for bringing in 340,000 newcomers this year, which, as you're talking about, has taken a big hit. Talk to me about why it was really important for us to reach this goal.
The strongest argument is one, the demographic growth that we need. Since the 70s, we have an aging population. We have very low fertility. So since the 70s and 80s, we've been using immigration to stop that further decline in our population. So that's a big one. And in terms of the economic argument for having immigration, there have been two camps. In the 80s or 90s, whenever there's a recession, Canada generally would turn off the tap for immigration because the belief is, we are going to bring in a lot of people, there are no jobs around, and they would rely on our government assistance, a social safety net. That's been the argument. But since the 90s, a new school and a new policy, that has been the case in the last 3 decades, is, even when Canada has a recession, we would still keep our immigration level high. And the belief, for that camp of scholars is, because immigrants, when they first settle down, they still spend a lot of money in housing and purchasing through that consumer consumption. It helps to stave that economic decline, and they still need to buy food, they still need to buy clothes, they still might need to spend a lot of money to start a new life. So that's the belief. But the argument, against that is, the immigrants who come through that period of time, less likely to find jobs or take longer to find jobs. And they would suffer what they call actually a longer lasting scarring effect, meaning that, it would take them much longer to catch up to, in terms of earnings, in terms of employment rates as, other Canadians. So it comes down to the public opinions, and we know that, generally we've had a very high support for immigration in general, Canada, over the last few decades. So in a way, it comes down to that public opinions. Yes, should we take in the same level of immigrants or even more? And that's what the Trudeau government actually believed in with the new announcement recently to not just, keep the same level of immigration, but actually to raise that level to bring in 1.2 million newcomers in the next 3 years.
And I talked to Fatima, one of the subjects from your piece, and she had a job all lined up in New Brunswick if the pandemic hadn't happened. Yes,
that's actually another indication that there are, jobs in areas in Canada that employers have a tough time to fill. And so is, what we are seeing now, by not allowing some of these people that Canada has already vetted and screened and granted visa, by stopping them from coming, is actually a lose-lose for, employers and for the immigrants themselves, and for Canadians in general, our economy.
Thank you for your time and your insight, Nicholas.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was Nicholas Keung, the Toronto Star's immigration reporter. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Sabai Tazaz, Adrian Chung, and Raju Mudhar. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Fozo. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.